For the last 4 years, America has had to endure a Trump presidency. Under his administration, tens of thousands of jobs were outsourced when he promised to bring back jobs. He promised to end the wars but gave the military total free range to do whatever they want. He said he would give everyone health care, but instead allowed nearly 250,000 people to die during the pandemic. Trump's presidency can be summed up as one of the greatest cons pulled off in U.S. history. Despite not keeping any of his promises, he maintained a sturdy base and a 90% approval rating within the Republican Party. Even with all the lies and unkept promises, his supporters maintained love for him, but it came at a cost. Now that the election is over, Joe Biden has come out on top as the next president-elect. While Democrats may have won this White House, this was not the victory they were expecting. Going into this fight, Joe Biden was expected to win a landslide victory. However, due to inaccurate polling, it quickly became a tight race. Trump increased his vote totals from 2016 from about 62 million votes to over 70 million votes in 2020. Democrats also hope to take back the Senate, but as of now, they have fallen short of doing so. With Democrats and Republicans both holding 48 Senate seats, the last two outstanding races for Senate are in Georgia, which is a deep red state. Democrats also lost about 6 seats in the House, decreasing their majority while still maintaining it. Trump will now be out of the White House, but the Democrats have a real battle on their hands come 2022. On this episode, we discuss the 2020 election and what we can expect from a Biden administration.
So we always say the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Our Wisconsin Revolution podcast, and I'm joined with my co-host William Walter. How you feeling about the election? Biden has won and Donald Trump is toast. How you feeling about it?
I am so incredibly ecstatic that Donald Trump lost, but at the same time, I am so incredibly depressed that Joe Biden won. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know, and Biden is by far the superior choice. I am more excited that Trump lost than I am depressed Biden won, but it's an uphill battle. You know, this should have been the easy part. This should have defeating the narcissistic, incompetent, wannabe dictator, pseudo-fascist should have been easy. Sadly, 70 plus million Americans are just absolutely delusional, living in some kind of distorted reality, or they just don't care. I'm not really sure what it is, but Biden is in. We've bought ourselves 4 more years. Let's get to work.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge difference between how, I guess, centrist voters kind of feel compared to like leftist voters feel, and that's pretty much summed up in an Onion tweet that stated, jubilant reaction to Trump defeat quickly soured by news of Biden win. Mm-hmm. And this matched with a little graphic of like young voters just kind of like, oh man, the reality setting in. But I think this election has told us something, that overall fascism isn't as attractive as maybe Trump thinks it is, but it is attractive to about 70 million Americans, which is pretty devastating to understand, which means that Democrats are going to have to work their ass off if they think they're going to win the next election. Because if you think about it, we had 4 years of a fascist who let 250,000 Americans die, yet he only barely lost this election.
If COVID doesn't hit, Donald Trump wins this in a landslide.
Exactly. There's a lot of arguments saying, you know, if it wasn't for COVID, he definitely would have won. And you have to believe that because, I mean, Joe Biden barely squeaked this win out, and the polling was completely off. I mean, it's almost hard to ever want to believe a poll again in America because it was so bad. Like they had him up at like 18 points in Wisconsin, and Donald Trump literally almost won Wisconsin. Biden only won Wisconsin by like 20,000 votes. So, I mean, the polling in America,
I got it right
bad.
Here, actually. Biden won by 21,000 in Wisconsin. And let's not forget, Libertarian candidate Joe Jorgensen had 38,000 votes. So thank you, third party. You have you have won this election. It's hilarious that for 4 years we had to hear the Blue Dog Hillary supporters ranting about how Jill Stein cost them the election, despite the fact that Gary Johnson got more votes than Jill Stein nationally by quite a bit. So they fought their tail off to get the Green Party removed from a number of ballots, and then Joe Jorgensen swooped in and pulled a reverse on the Republicans. So I'm seeing a lot of hardcore righties that are really flaming that and demanding that the party do something about that going forward. The irony is delicious.
In Wisconsin, if every vote went from Joe Jorgensen went to Trump, wouldn't he have won in Wisconsin?
Yes, if every vote went to Trump, he would have won, correct. He would have been at 1,648,000 approximately, which would have beaten Joe Biden by 18,000 votes.
So every vote for a third party is a vote for Joe Biden is the narrative.
Yep, that's very well put, and hilarious considering what we've had to hear for 4 years. There was also 8,000 write-ins that are not specifically labeled, whether that was Howie Hawkins or Bernie Sanders or Joe Mama or whoever, people that were going to still vote but not vote for either the two major candidates, whichever way they had gone in that decision. But it's funny. It's really funny.
Wow, that is interesting. I bet you Democrats will not be blaming the Libertarian Party for this win. But one thing that is interesting about this election is how Democrats will approach how Democrats will approach governing in the next 4 years. On one hand, they can go down the path of basically creating or making deals with the Conservative Party or the Republican Party and Mitch McConnell, or they can draw a hard line and push for the American people. And honestly, I don't know how it's going to go from my just kind of thinking back of 8 years of Obama, where they were trying to create the grand bargain and work with the Republican Party and say, hey, these guys aren't as crazy as you think. I'm a little bit worried about that and think that there is going to be endless compromises in favor of corporations. We've seen how much money Joe Biden has taken from Wall Street. So I wonder what type of policy he'll make in the next 4 years. And as you can see, it doesn't look like the Democrats won the Senate. It looks like it's going to come down to the last two Senate races in Georgia, which is a deep red state. So it's not looking like they're going to have a majority. Yeah, that's true. But Maine flipped for Biden, but they reelected Susan Collins. So
I agree.
It's not necessarily working down ballot as much as top of the ballot.
I think this definitely could be a problem. There's a number of aspects to look at it. Was Donald Trump being on the ballot enough of a energizer to get a lot of Republicans out that wouldn't have otherwise voted? Hence why some of the down ballot races went so well for them. If those same Republicans that are now furious at the system don't come out to vote in the runoff, maybe it goes a little bit better for the Democrats who understand the importance of this. I think the argument could be made that Joe Biden winning the presidency and the Democrats not retaking the Senate is absolute worst case scenario. If McConnell wants to, he can just stonewall anything and everything that Biden wants to do, much like he did for Obama's final 4 years. And I fear that by purposely negating anything that Biden wants to accomplish, the inevitable economic collapse that will follow the COVID relief bubble bursting will be insanely easy for the Republicans to then write the narrative on. They can go back to their base and say, look, we told you that Joe Biden would destroy the economy. He's ruining everything. Donald Trump built such a great economy, and now Biden ruined it. Obviously, people who follow politics would know that's because Mitch McConnell wouldn't allow Biden to do anything. But, you're not voting Republican if you follow politics very closely. So once they get that narrative out there, it's GG. Biden will look like he completely blew up the economy. The Republicans will sweep the 2022 midterms, and they'll have their actually competent fascist ready to go and up for the challenge for 2024, which they will likely win easily. So if that happens, and this is something we've talked about before, that if Biden fails to address any of the systemic issues that have kind of bubbled over in America since the election of Donald Trump, I'm not saying that Donald Trump caused all these issues. Obviously, they have been around for years, but Trump's kind of lack of decor and inability to refrain from saying the quiet part out loud has kind of made a lot of these issues really kind of rear their ugly head. And if Biden fails to address any of these issues, the Republicans are just going to sweep the midterms, sweep 2024, and then the fascism train will be rolling down the hill, and it might be too heavy to slow down.
Yeah, and you got a point there, because Mitch McConnell has no incentives to work with the Democrats, because he has the Supreme Court, he'll have the Senate, and he can blame everything on the left. So he really has zero incentive to work with the Democrats. And like you said, if he blames it on Democrats why the economy is tanking, they can literally straw man the left and get a majority in Congress as well. So I mean, as far as political strategy, it's great, but for the American people, it's going to be terrible.
That's what I should have mentioned. That in my opinion, this was worst case scenario for the American people, because I think obviously the Republican establishment's got to be grinning from ear to ear. This was best case scenario for them. They still retain the Senate, so they can block any bold progressive legislation that Biden might want to do. They also were able to ditch Donald Trump, who is, an absolute psychopath. He's uncontrollable. He kind of reminds me of that scene from The Dark Knight where Alfred's talking to Christian Bale, and he's like, these criminals were desperate, so they turned to a man they didn't fully understand. I think that's kind of the Republicans with Donald Trump. They are unable to control him. He is a loose cannon. He is wild. He is potentially damaging to the party long term, to everything that they want to do and that they want to accomplish. He could single-handedly ruin the Republican brand. So they've been wanting to get rid of him for a while, but they can't actually turn on him, because if they do, his base, which is kind of now the Republican base as a whole, will freak out and start turning on the Republicans, which we're seeing in a lot of these places. We're seeing them chanting in Arizona, Fox News sucks, Fox News sucks. I'm seeing a lot of Trumpers that I know that are legitimately furious at the Republican Party, saying things along the lines of, if the Republicans don't defend Donald Trump, if they don't come to bat for Donald Trump here, I'm never voting Republican again, which is wild to see it on the other shoe now. Normally Republicans are so good about falling in line. They say Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. To see this kind of infighting is remarkable. But for the Republican establishment to now be able to ditch Donald Trump without having to purposely go against him, to just kind of let the situation play out, they got to be loving it. And I think the Democratic establishment is loving this too. If they did win the Senate, they would be expected to do stuff. They would have to expend some political capital and get something accomplished, or their base, the liberal base would kind of be recognizing like, yo, you guys have this ability and you're still not doing anything. You've obviously been lying to us this whole time. Now, when they inevitably don't do anything, when, quote, nothing fundamentally changes, unquote, which we know was Biden's goal from the get-go, it'll be incredibly easy for the Democratic establishment to just be like, yo, it's the Republican Senate's fault. We can't do anything while the Republicans have the Senate. Sorry. So it gives them a free excuse to not push any of this progressive agenda that they would have been forced to do if they had control of all three houses.
Exactly. What the Democrats need to do is they have to completely demonize Mitch McConnell. Everything that's bad, they have to attach to him. Throw out ads, go on the media, do what the Republicans do to Nancy Pelosi to Mitch McConnell. And they have to attach everything to him. But the problem is Democrats don't have the backbone to actually do that. They're more than likely, they're going to take it laying down, take all the hits from Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party, and not actually combat the propaganda that they're going to be faced with. But if they can do that, if they can attach everything bad to Mitch McConnell, then they can actually win states like Wisconsin, because Ron Johnson is up for re-election. And if he's looks like the head guy who's attached to the hip to Mitch McConnell, who's trying to tank the economy, who's stopping any progress on pandemic relief, then they can successfully win Wisconsin, because we know Wisconsin is a very populous state. And if Democrats run a populist candidate and say, hey, we're going to look out for you, we're going to get you pandemic relief, we're going to make sure you get health care, I think they can successfully win Wisconsin. If you give Wisconsin something to vote for, they traditionally vote blue statewide. So I think if they can successfully win the media narrative around Mitch McConnell, they can actually win some or pick up some Senate seats. And one of the statistics that is going to be helpful in this 2022 election is that Democrats only have 12 seats up for election and Republicans have 22 seats up for election. So statistically, that should favor the Democrats, but knowing how Democrats traditionally campaign, kind of centrist and without a huge, great message, I'm not sure whether it'll make a difference, but I guess we'll find out in 2022.
You made a great point, too, that I think was one of the biggest failings of the Democratic message for this campaign cycle was they kind of made it a referendum on Donald Trump instead of making it a referendum on the Republican Party and their enabling of Donald Trump. Instead of painting all of these Republicans who have been siding with Trump, who have been allowing Trump to get away with this, who have been pushing Trump to continue being their kind of blind lackey, instead of saying like, hello, American voters, they allowed this, they protected this, they backed up this man. He is we're in this same boat because they were so defensive of him. Instead, they just went out to say like, oh, orange man bad, or Donald Trump is we have to defeat him. He's so wild. If they had done a better job of kind of equating Trump to the party instead of Trump to the problem, I think they would have likely done significantly better in some of these national races. And that's so frustrating to me now when I saw it already the day of on CNN and like what John Kasich said on Twitter the other day, how all these leftists, all the Democrats, the message that they got from frankly what was a horrible election, considering the catastrophic events of the past year, to barely win the presidency against someone as incompetent as Trump, to not win back the Senate, and to lose House seats is embarrassing. Democratic leadership should all be replaced, and they should be looking introspectively into themselves as the problem, but they won't. Instead, they're just going to blame it on going too far left, like they've been doing for 50 years, and they'll use it as an excuse to keep pushing right, which is absolutely pathetic when you consider that all progressive candidates that side with Medicare for All won their re-election, and more centrist Democrats who do not support Medicare for All lost their re-election. These are popular policies. Popular policies win elections. And look at Florida, where Donald Trump won by 3%. $15 minimum wage, or by 3 points, $15 minimum wage won by almost 30 points. More people voted for that than for either presidential candidate, despite the fact that that was one of Joe Biden's campaign talking points. This shows that these progressive ideas are very popular, not just with Democrats, but with the population as a whole. There was they blew up online that the night of as well, the Fox News voter polls. Changing to a government-run healthcare plan was the question they posed, which in and of itself kind of has a negative affirmation of the government plan. By wording it that way, you're more likely to get negative responses instead of saying something like offering a plan. It's kind of implying that you're going to be forced to choose this government healthcare plan. Yet still, even with that, 72% of Fox News voters are in favor of changing to a government-run healthcare plan. Supreme Court action on Roe v. Wade, 71% want to leave as is compared to 29% who want to overturn. What should we do with illegal immigration in the United States? 72% say pathway to citizenship, 28% deportation. U.S. gun laws, 55% more strict, 33% kept as is, 12% less strict. Every single one of these popular progressive policies were heavily supported by Fox News Voters. Role of government. 60% should do more. Increasing government spending on green and renewable energy. 70% in favor. How concerned are you about the effects of climate change? 70% in favor. Donald Trump's approach to Russia. 80% say not strong enough or about right. Only 4% say too tough. How serious of a problem is racism in the United States? 70%. You know, we're sensing a theme here. Nearly 7 out of 10 Fox News viewers support popular progressive ideas. Yet for some reason, the left party, the Democrats, are doing all they can to shut it down early, like they did completely destroying the progressive movement behind Bernie Sanders. And, you know, Republicans are never going to consider that in the slightest, so it shouldn't even be brought up in that regard, even though their voters support these ideas. I think there's a large amount of voters who are disillusioned with both parties, and they just want to see policy. We saw a number of House races in what would be considered swing districts and or red-leaning districts that were won by progressive candidates that supported minimum wage. Katie Porter, for example, or Medicare for All, Katie Porter, for example. Some of these ideas, legalization of marijuana, Green New Deal, Medicare, these are free wins. These are absolute election freebies that the major two parties don't want to get behind because they're making so much money off of the big corporate donors who do not want these policies enacted because it cuts into their bottom line.
Well, that goes into the hugest reason why Democrats don't, steer towards progressive policy. Joe Biden got $74 million from Wall Street this election cycle. What incentive does he have to support a $15 minimum wage or Medicare for All or a Green New Deal when Wall Street is like, hey, nah, that's not going to pad our bottom line? So this is the problem with the Democrats. They can't move left or actually do anything for working class people because they're beholden by the donors. But also the Republican Party is. I'm not letting them off the hook. But the thing is, the Republicans have successfully propagandize people and believing they're on the working class people's side, because even though they're not really going to do anything for you, at least they're not going to tax you, right? Mm-hmm. If Democrats are going to tax you, what they need to do to combat that situation is they need to give you economic security. They need to give you Medicare for All. You need to actually get something for your taxes. Medicare for All, universal child care, a $15 minimum wage, unionization, things that is going to improve your lifestyle. That way, if you do get taxed, you can offset that balance of a tax hit. But this is the problem with Democrats. They're like, oh, we're going to tax you, but you can't get anything for it. And that's the problem. It's like, what are you taxing me for? What am I getting back for? More war? More endless subsidies to oil? How is that going to benefit me? And this is why Democrats lose.
That's a great point.
At least Republicans, they're saying, hey, we're going to cut your taxes. We're still going to continue the wars. We're still going to give subsidies to big banks and big oil and big pharma. But guess what? We're not going to tax you out of existence. And that shit works. So this is why Democrats are losing, because they don't offer anything except for flowery speeches and identity politics. Like, hey, you're not going to get anything, but hey, you get a black vice president. You're not going to get anything, but hey, Black Lives Matter. And that's the problem.
Not going to get anything, but hey, we're going to use pronouns on our Twitter account.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, identity is very important when it comes to representation, but it is not the end all be all. You lose elections if that's all you lose elections if that's all you focus on. And we can see that they barely eked out this election because they focused on anti-Trump messaging and identity politics, and that's all the election was about. And you can see it in the results. I mean, he barely beat Trump, who was a neo-fascist, who literally let 250,000 Americans die.
Some of I just can't.
My mind just can't even wrap around.
No, I know it's incredible. Some of the Edison exit poll numbers are just fascinating. So here's my personal favorite one that I saw. According to the exit poll, Donald Trump did better in 2020 with every race and gender except white men. Compared to 2016, Joe Biden gained 5 points with white men. But Donald Trump gained 2 points with white women, 4 points with black men, 4 points with black women, 3 points with Latino men, and 3 points with Latino women. That is absurd. The Democratic Party has been taking this voting block for granted for far too long. They just assume that they'll get their vote despite the fact that they aren't doing anything to earn it. So they're just like, oh, well, whatever. The minorities are going to keep voting for us. Let's just go try to get that elusive white Republican voter to flip over. That's how we're going to win this election. Well, guess what? No, you're not. 93% of registered Republicans voted for Donald Trump in 2020 compared to 90% in 2016. More Republicans voted for Donald Trump this election than they did against Hillary Clinton, despite the Lincoln Project and their $67 million grift, which not only was worthless, it seems to have not helped at all. It's absolutely astounding that the Democrats aren't able to take a step back and kind of look at this as in, well, what did we do wrong? I mean, Trump won the highest share of non-white support of any Republican in 60 years. 60 years. Well, let's take a specific example. Starr County, Texas, the most Hispanic county in America, which, by the way, Bernie Sanders won by 3-1 compared to Joe Biden. It's also the third poorest county in America, per capita income of $7,000. In 2012, Jesus. Obama won by 73 points. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won by 60 points. In 2020, Joe Biden won by 5 points. That is astronomical. Astronomical. They are completely throwing away the base that has been winning them elections for years and years and years. They are taking it for granted, and they're expecting the minorities to bail them out again, which they did, honestly. You look at Atlanta, exactly. Milwaukee, Detroit, some of these inner cities that had heavy Democratic turnout, but also have a heavy black population. I'll be brutally honest. Black people saved America again, as they've been doing for years and years and years.
Yeah, but the question is what is black people going to get to show for it?
Exactly.
I mean, we talked about this with that voter in Milwaukee. He said, under Obama, the north side is the north side. Under Trump, the north side is the north side. And under Biden, the north side will stay the north side. So, I mean, we don't. The statistics say it right there. Black people are very loyal to the Democratic Party. 87% of black people voted for the Democratic Party, yet I do not see any tangible change.
They're getting nothing in return. The Democrats are just ignoring them.
Exactly. I don't see any investments coming our way. Legalization of marijuana would go a long way in the black neighborhoods, especially if you give black neighborhoods the incentives to profit off of legalization of marijuana. But Joe Biden doesn't support legalization of marijuana. He doesn't even support a decriminalization of it. So at this point, I don't really see any tangible effects that will actually happen for the black community. And I mean, you can hope for like more investment in the black community, but a lot of that comes down to state budgets, which obviously in Wisconsin, we have a red legislator. We have a Republican legislator. But, I mean, as far as federal, like you said, Mitch McConnell is going to be probably the speaker or the majority leader. And I don't see him letting anything through that's actually going to tangibly help people. So
he's just going to obstruct for the next 4 years, and absolutely nothing will get done. You made a great point about the Wisconsin legislation. Robin Vos came out a couple days ago, it might have even been yesterday, and basically said, hey, well, Wisconsin's going to do whatever it takes to make sure this election wasn't tampered with. We're going to do we're going to make a commission to do a full, or make a committee to do a full recheck of all of our systems and whatnot, because he can't accept defeat. So they'll throw money into checking whatever this might have been that went wrong, but they won't meet in over 200 days in the midst of the largest global pandemic of the 100 years.
Situation, but what's funny about that whole situation is the Republican Party created the rules the way they are now today. They could have really put in actual legislation that say, okay, you can count absentee ballots as they come in. Instead, they wanted them to be counted after the election started.
Pennsylvania and Michigan had that too, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's literally the Republicans' fault that we had these delayed counts and probably some issues with the election counting.
Is it their fault or is it by design? Did they knowingly?
It's their fault by design.
That's my point. Yeah, they did that on purpose, knowing that their base would get riled up when the votes were starting to come in later and later and later and start to flip it, it would easily help them push their narrative of a rigged election, which we're seeing now getting blasted all over the QAnon circles and whatnot.
Exactly, because Florida, they have the situation where you count the ballots as they come, and they had a completely smooth election. So it's literally set up this way in battleground states. As you can see, it's all in battleground states that this problem is happening, that the ballots don't get counted until after the election starts. So it's literally set up by design, and Robin Voss is no nonpartisan actor in this situation. He definitely set this up. But there's no proof that there's any election rigging or any misdeeds in the Wisconsin election. The reporters asked him, actually not him, but I think it was Ron Tussler who's going to head the committee, and his only evidence was that Donald Trump said there might have been some misdeeds. Like, he's a reputable source. It literally doesn't make sense.
Donald Trump, the least reputable source on the planet, literally incapable of lying for more than, or of telling the truth for more than like 5 words at a time, is somehow like the decider on what's considered legitimate and whatnot, despite the fact that he is yet to show any proof for any of his accusations either.
Exactly. But we got 4 years of Donald Trump and literally 250,000 people dead. I know I keep saying it, but it's just amazing to me that this election was this close. I mean, it shouldn't have been this close, but Joe Biden had literally no economic message. And I think your point about not tying the Republican Party to Donald Trump was a huge mistake. I mean, literally, they should have tied every stupid thing he did to Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party on every ad, on every public radio announcement, on every media announcement. But they made it the anti-Trump election without demonizing the Republican Party for how batshit crazy they are. And that was a huge mistake. And they painted the Republican Party as, you know, Trump might be crazy, but the Republican Party themselves are still sane. And that's completely false.
Agreed.
This shit is stressful.
And like you want to kind of take that step back and be like, all right, well, this has been an absolute dumpster fire for the past month or whatever. Let's take a deep breath. Let's calm down. Let's kind of reflect on what we've gone through. We've earned a little bit of rest, but I don't feel comfortable doing that because, like we've said before, this is really when the work begins. Just by defeating one fascist, just because we get the overt racism taken care of doesn't mean the covert racism is going to be any better. I mean, this is the guy who literally wrote the crime bill. So, and I'm not saying people can't improve. I hear a lot of people that I really do trust, reputable people in the politics world, that have been saying things like, you know, oh, well, I know it's hard to believe, but Biden might be the most progressive administration of all time. And as sad as that is, it might have some accuracy to it, just because American presidents have never really been progressive. Obviously, FDR is kind of the standard bearer of that, and we're going to need some kind of new age New Deal if we want to avoid cataclysm. But I don't know. I want to have faith that Biden recognizes the legitimacy of this situation, how precarious we are on the edge of destruction, and that he will react accordingly. But because you can only do so much without control of the Senate as well, and any executive orders could be challenged by the court, I don't know. I want to be able to breathe and relax for a little bit and you know, have a beer and chalk it up. Hey, we won. We got it done. We got it taken care of. But I just don't feel like that's accurate. I feel like this is when the real work begins. We need to be out in the streets. We need to be making our voices heard, both on the streets and on the web. We need to be contacting our representatives. We need to be letting them know that a return to the liberal brunch status quo is not good enough, and that's not acceptable. And if you think that is acceptable, you are doing nothing but setting the stage for a competent fascist to rise to power, at which point life as we know it, especially American life, will be over.
if we don't learn from history, we fall victim to it. And if we look at 8 years of neoliberalism in which they failed to combat the right-wing fascists, the Republican Party, we've seen the complete onslaught of Democrats and the complete uprise of Donald Trump. And if we don't combat the Republican Party this time around, no matter if we have the Senate or not, I fear there will be another fascist on the rise in a very, very short time. We may not have 8 years of a Democratic administration. We might only have 4 years. And then we have another fascist in office again. So we have to take this moment in history very seriously. We cannot stop because Joe Biden is in office. We have to put pressure on him to actually combat the Republican Party and Mitch McConnell and fight like hell. And if we don't, I have serious fear that we're going to actually have a competent fascist in the office who actually knows
the system, knows how to manipulate it.
Yeah, and exactly. And we know that neoliberals will completely, let whatever Republican president get away whatever they want as long as they speak nice with the decorum. We know, and
they don't have meany tweets.
Exactly, and they will let them get away with whatever they want. So I'm very fearful about these next 4 years, but I gotta have some hope.
Well, how about this? I'll shoot you one silver lining that I've found, and it goes back to how a lot of the really hardcore Trumpers are incredibly upset with the Republican Party for not protecting dear leader. Let's say hypothetically that they are so incredibly frustrated that they break off from the Republican Party. They are starting to recognize what a lot of progressives and leftists have been saying for years now, that both parties are, they're two wings of the same bird. And they start to kind of see like, oh, well, maybe they are happy with Biden because he's been around for years. They know all about him. They can handle it. They didn't want Donald Trump, who really was in there to protect us and really was not part of the establishment. So they kind of branch off into their own, kind of like the Tea Party, but bigger. So the Tea Party and the Trump Party kind of merge. And we now have a legitimate fascist party that breaks the Republican Party in two. Well, obviously, if that were to happen, for the same reason that progressives could never officially split from the Democrats would win every single election. So Republicans would be much more inclined to implement some kind of national ranked choice voting. And obviously, we need the Republicans to go along with that before it actually has a shot of passing, because the Democrats are too damn soft to do anything about it themselves. But if that were to happen and ranked choice voting could be implemented, that would then allow the true progressives to break off from the Democratic Party, and we could actually have a system that is more accurately reflective of the population than our two-party duopoly. We could have the far-right fascist Trump Party, the can't believe I'm saying this about the Republicans, but they would be the center-right party. The Democrats would be the center-left, despite the fact that they would still be extremely far-right. And then the progressives could be like an actually centrist by the theoretical consideration, by the philosophical consideration of centrism, or maybe slightly left of that. And we could actually have an opposition party that would be a working-class party that would be fighting for the average American citizen.
That would actually be a dream scenario, but I highly doubt that'll happen. But hey, you never know.
We can dream, right?
It would be a serious dream scenario if the QAnon Trump Republicans just break off and create a third party. That would be nice, and then we can actually get some rise to the left as well. Or the best case scenario is we break up into 13 districts and then overthrow the Capitol.
That's my fantasy. I'll say the Republicans breaking into the Trumpers and Republicans breaking their party in half is like my dream. But if you could say like, what's your ultimate fantasy? It would be that. It would be the 13 districts.
Oh yeah. But yeah, eventually the 13 districts will get partisan, and they'll be like, "Hey, you're too far left. You're too far right. Whatever." It'll just be more of the same. But overall, Joe Biden is the next president-elect of the United States. We got the fascists out. I'm not optimistic about a Joe Biden administration, but we have to fight him at every step as if we're fighting any other elected official, and we got to hold them accountable, because if we don't, democracy is going to die.
And remember that organization is the foundation of a successful movement. And these type of movements, nothing starts from the top and builds down. You build a human pyramid with the football, the 6'6" football player, the big offensive lineman at the bottom. You don't have the cheerleader at the bottom. You need a strong base before you can grow from there. True structural change begins from the ground up. And that is whether that's your state or local elections. Be active, get involved, make sure your voice is heard. We have a lot of work to do, but this starts locally. This starts within your community. How can you help your community to be a better place today, tomorrow, and for the future of your children?
Hell yeah, the fight doesn't stop. It just continues. So everybody, thank you for joining the Our Wisconsin Revolution podcast. We're going to be doing this every week. So subscribe, do whatever you can to get this word out. We really want to grow this channel. So thank you for joining us, me and Will Walter.
Stay safe, everybody. Get some sleep. You've earned it.
Well, yeah, get a little sleep, get a little bit of brunch, but get back to work as soon as possible.
So we always say the Black Panther Party, that they can do anything they want to us.